My name is Sophia. I'm 31 years old, and I've spent most of my life in a quiet little town in Massachusetts. If you saw me on the street, you probably wouldn't look twice. I'm just an ordinary woman with shoulder-length brown hair that never seems to stay in place, and the kind of smile people say looks more polite than happy. But behind that simple smile, there's a story I never thought I'd have to tell. I grew up in a family that, to me, felt like the center of the world. My parents weren't rich in the flashy sense, but they had worked hard their entire lives to build something meaningful. My dad owned a small construction company, and my mom managed the books. Together, they bought a modest house and slowly, piece by piece, invested in a few properties around town. Nothing fancy, nothing that would make headlines, but enough to make sure their children would have security when they were gone. I used to watch them sitting at the kitchen table late at night, Dad with his reading glasses slipping down his nose, Mom with her neat handwriting filling ledgers. To them, every dollar had a purpose. Every decision meant something for the future. They used to tell me and my brother, "We're not leaving you with diamonds or castles. We're leaving you with stability, with roots." At the time, I didn't fully understand what they meant. I just thought it was boring adult talk. But now, I wish I had paid more attention. Because that inheritance, the one they worked their entire lives for, became the reason my life was turned upside down. My family's story isn't just about money. It's about love, betrayal, and the kind of shocking twist you'd never expect to happen between siblings. You see, my brother, the person I trusted most, took what was mine. He stole my inheritance. But what he didn't know was that life had a way of turning tables, and one day he would collapse in shock. When he realized the truth, the house he was so proud of, the one he called his, actually belonged to me. When I think back to my childhood, the first image that always comes to mind is my brother, Daniel. He's 2 years older than me, and for most of my early years, he was my hero. If I scraped my knee while playing outside, he'd be the one dragging me back into the house, yelling for Mom. If the neighborhood kids picked teams for baseball, he always made sure I wasn't left standing last. We weren't perfect, of course. We argued about toys, about who got the bigger slice of pizza, and about whose turn it was to wash the dishes. But at night, when the house was quiet, I remember sneaking into his room because I was scared of the dark. He never complained, never told me to go away. He'd just roll his eyes, lift the blanket, and let me fall asleep beside him. Family gatherings were where our bond truly showed. Every Thanksgiving, the whole extended family would crowd into our living room. The air always smelled like turkey, pies, and cinnamon candles. Daniel and I would put on silly little shows for our cousins. He'd play the guitar badly, and I'd dance around pretending to be a singer. Everyone laughed, not because we were any good, but because we were happy. Those were the moments that made me believe we'd always have each other's backs. But as I sit here remembering those nights of laughter and warmth, I can't help but feel a sting in my chest. Looking back, I realize there were signs, small ones. The way Daniel sometimes clung too tightly to praise, the way his smile stretched widest when he was the center of attention, the way he hated losing even in silly board games. At the time, I thought it was just normal sibling behavior. Now I see it differently. I should have seen the signs back then. Losing my parents felt like someone had pulled the floor out from under me. It didn't happen all at once. First came Dad's heart attack, sudden and merciless, followed by Mom's slow decline only a year later. By the time I stood at her funeral, dressed in black with my hands trembling, it felt like every bit of stability I'd ever known had been stripped away. I can still hear the soft rustle of tissues in the church pews, the low murmur of people offering condolences, and the way Daniel squeezed my shoulder, whispering, "We'll get through this, Em. Just you and me now." At the time, I believed him. A few weeks later, we sat in a polished oak office that smelled faintly of leather and old paper. The attorney, a graying man with round glasses, unfolded a crisp document, our parents' will. My heart beat heavy in my chest as he read through their words, their legacy, their life's work laid out in black and white. There was the house we grew up in, a couple of rental properties in town, some savings, and Dad's business assets. It wasn't extravagant, but it was everything they had built with their hands and hearts. I expected the reading to bring comfort, maybe even a sense of closure, but instead I felt the air shift the moment the lawyer finished. Daniel leaned forward, his elbows pressing into the polished table, his eyes sharp in a way I had never seen before. "So, what's the quickest way to transfer everything under my name?" he asked, cutting off the lawyer before he could explain anything further. I remember staring at him, stunned. His name? Not our names. Not together. Just his. The lawyer cleared his throat and carefully explained that the assets were to be split evenly between the two of us. 50-50. That's what Mom and Dad had wanted. Daniel forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Of course, he said smoothly, waving his hand like it was Just a misunderstanding, but I knew better. There was a hunger in his voice, a sharpness that made my stomach twist. That was the first time I saw it clearly. His greed. And though I tried to push the thought aside, a cold unease settled in my chest. My brother, the boy who once let me hide under his blanket when I was scared of the dark, had just shown me a different side of himself. A side I wasn't ready to face. After the will was read, I tried to convince myself that things would be fair. Mom and Dad had been clear. Half for me, half for Daniel. It was simple, right? But nothing about the weeks that followed felt simple. Daniel had this way of talking that could make the most ridiculous things sound reasonable. He'd sit across from me at the kitchen table of our childhood home, his voice calm, his eyes steady. Listen, he'd say, you don't need to stress about handling properties or dealing with tenants. That's my world, not yours. You're better off focusing on your career, your own life. Let me take care of everything. And the thing is, I wanted to believe him. I was still drowning in grief. Waking up in the middle of the night to an empty house, hearing echoes of my parents' laughter in rooms that now felt cold. The thought of managing deeds, payments, and contracts made my chest feel heavy. So I let him talk. I let him tell me it was too much responsibility, that I'd just get overwhelmed, that he'd handle the paperwork and make sure I got what I needed. At first, he was gentle about it. He'd offer to cover small bills, slip me money when I needed it, always reminding me, "See, I'm looking out for you." But slowly, his words turned sharper, more pointed. One night, I remember sitting on the couch with him. He leaned forward, clasping his hands together, his tone full of frustration. You don't get it. If you don't let me consolidate things, we could lose everything, the taxes, the upkeep. Do you really want to risk that? Do you want to ruin what Mom and Dad built?" Those words hit me like a knife. Ruin what Mom and Dad built? The guilt sank deep into my stomach. I didn't want to be the one who messed things up. So I nodded, even when my heart whispered that something was off. And just like that, I started signing things I didn't fully understand. Deeds, transfers, agreements. Daniel always reassuring me it was just technical stuff. I told myself I was doing the right thing, that I was protecting our parents' legacy, but deep down, I think I knew. I think a small part of me realized I wasn't protecting anything at all. I was giving it away. And the guilt of that still lingers. It didn't happen all at once. It was little by little, like a slow leak I didn't notice until the floor was flooded. At first, Daniel assured me everything was in process. The properties were being managed, the accounts were being consolidated. I didn't ask too many questions. I trusted him. But then, one afternoon, I got a call from the bank. A polite voice on the other end asked me to confirm that I no longer held joint ownership of one of the rental properties. My chest tightened. No longer held ownership? I hadn't signed anything like that, or at least I didn't think I had. My hands trembled as I pulled out the stack of documents Daniel had asked me to sign over the past months. Legal jargon, thick paragraphs I never fully read. And there it was, my signature neat and unquestioning on every single one. He hadn't just been managing things, he'd been transferring everything into his name, quietly, methodically, without so much as a second thought about me. When I confronted him, his reaction wasn't guilt, it was anger. Don't be dramatic, he snapped, his jaw tight. I'm protecting what's ours. You wouldn't even know what to do with any of this. You should be grateful I'm taking care of it. Grateful. That word cut deeper than a knife. That night, I sat on the floor of my tiny apartment because by then, I'd already moved out of our childhood home. My back pressed against the wall, knees pulled to my chest, and the papers spread around me like pieces of a life I no longer recognized. I cried until my eyes burned, not just because of the money or the house or the properties, but because my brother, the one person who was supposed to stand by me, had looked me in the eye and chosen greed over love. I kept asking myself the same questions over and over. How could he do this? Did he ever love me, or was it always about control? Was I blind this whole time? The silence of that night was unbearable, and for the first time in my life, I realized I was truly alone. After the betrayal, there was no safety net left for me, no family home, no shared assets, no comfort of knowing someone had my back. It was just me. I remember standing in the middle of a small one-bedroom apartment I could barely afford, staring at the blank white walls. The rent ate up most of my paycheck, the heating barely worked in winter, and the windows rattled whenever the wind blew too hard. But it was mine, or at least as mine as something rented could be. I started working long hours at a local bookstore, the kind of place that smelled like old paper and coffee grounds. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady. During the day, I stacked shelves and rang up customers. At night, I counted coins and worried if I'd have enough to cover groceries after rent. There were nights when I skipped dinner, choosing to pay the electric bill instead. There were mornings when I cried in the shower because the weight of everything felt unbearable. And yet, somehow, little by little, I kept going. The first time I managed to pay rent on time without borrowing a single dollar, I sat on the couch with a cheap takeout meal and tears streaming down my face. Not say, tears, relieved ones. I had done it. On my own. Each small win became a lifeline. A new friend at work who always brought me coffee. Finding a thrift store jacket for $5 that made me feel, for the first time in months, a little bit like myself again. The first book recommendation I gave to a customer who came back smiling a week later, thanking me. They weren't big victories, but they were mine. And with each one, I felt something shift inside me. A quiet strength. A whisper that maybe, just maybe, I didn't need Daniel or anyone else to build a life worth living. For the first time in a long time, I started to believe in myself again. It happened on a rainy afternoon, one of those days where the sky feels heavy and the whole world seems to drag its feet. I was sorting through a cardboard box I had shoved into the back of my closet, the last of Mom and Dad's papers I hadn't been able to face since their passing. Most of it was the usual, old receipts, tax records, letters yellowed with age. But then, tucked between a stack of utility bills, I found a thin envelope with my name written on it in my mother's neat handwriting. I froze. For a long moment, I just held it in my hands, tracing the familiar loops of her pen, my throat tightening. Finally, I tore it open with shaking fingers. Inside was a folded document, crisp and official. It was a deed to a house. And not just any house, Daniel's house. The same house he bragged about, the one he threw parties in, the one he proudly called his. But the deed said otherwise. It was in my name, mine, signed and notarized years ago, long before my parents passed. I sat back against the wall, the paper slipping from my hands as I tried to catch my breath. My parents, they had done this deliberately, quietly, without telling Daniel. I could almost hear my mom's voice as I read her brief note tucked inside the envelope. Sophia, one day you may need this. We know your brother. He can be careless, and sometimes his ambition blinds him. This is for your security, your future. Don't tell him until you must. Tears blurred the words, but my heart was pounding. Not from sadness this time, but from something else. A surge of power, of justice, of the possibility that maybe I wasn't as helpless as I had thought. The irony made me laugh out loud, a bitter, shaky laugh that echoed through my tiny apartment. Daniel had stolen everything he could from me, and yet the very roof over his head, the house he paraded as his success, legally belonged to me. I folded the deed back carefully, clutching it to my chest as if it were a lifeline. For the first time in years, the tables had turned, and Daniel had no idea. In the weeks after I found the deed, I kept it tucked safely in a folder, hidden away in the back of my dresser. Every night before bed, I would take it out, trace the seal with my fingers, and remind myself that I wasn't powerless. Not anymore. But I didn't confront Daniel right away. Instead, I watched. Daniel had always loved the spotlight, but after our parents passed, his arrogance only grew louder. I'd see photos of him on social media, smiling with a glass of champagne in one hand, surrounded by people I barely recognized. The house, my house, had become his stage. Loud music, expensive cars parked along the street, lights blazing in every room as if he owned the entire neighborhood. I remember one evening driving past just to see for myself. Through the window, I caught glimpses of strangers laughing, music shaking the walls. Daniel at the center of it all with his arm around some woman, grinning like he had the world in his pocket. He didn't look like the brother I used to know. He looked untouchable, smug, like nothing and no one could ever bring him down. I sat in my car across the street, my hands gripping the steering wheel, so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I wanted to scream the truth right then and there, to walk in and shout, "This house isn't yours, it's mine." But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I let him keep playing king of a castle that wasn't his. Because with every arrogant laugh, with every careless display of pride, my determination grew stronger. He thought he had won. He thought he had taken everything from me. But little did he know, the very foundation beneath his feet already belonged to me. And when the time came, that truth would break him in a way he never expected. The narrator sat at her small wooden desk, the one she had bought secondhand when she first moved into her tiny apartment. Papers were spread out before her. She ran her fingers over the crisp edges of the documents, her heart pounding louder with every line she read. There it was, her parents' signatures, the official seal, the clear statement. The house was in her name. For a long moment, she couldn't breathe. She had imagined this discovery 100 times, but now that it was real, the weight of it nearly crushed her. She whispered to herself, voice trembling but steadying with each word. He took everything from me, every dollar, every memory, every piece of trust. But he never realized the roof over his head was mine. Tears welled in her eyes, not the tears of helplessness she had cried so many nights before, but tears of power, of reclaiming what was rightfully hers. She leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. The memories of her brother's smug smile, his careless words, and his betrayal replayed like a broken film reel. Each image fueled her determination. No more silence, no more standing in the shadows. She folded the documents carefully, tucked them into a folder, and slipped it into her bag. Her hands still trembled, but this time it wasn't fear. It was anticipation. The confrontation was coming, and she was finally ready. The night was so quiet, it almost felt like the world was holding its breath. My chest tightened as I stood in front of the grand house, and my parents' house. My house. My hands shook around the folder of documents I had been waiting to show him. Taking a deep breath, I climbed the steps and walked inside. Laughter echoed through the living room. Music played low in the background. And there he was, my brother, sitting on the sofa with a glass of wine, wearing that same smug expression I had grown to despise. He looked at me and smirked. "Well, look who finally decided to visit. What do you want now? More pity?" My voice trembled at first, but I forced my eyes to stay steady. "I came for what's mine." He laughed, nearly spilling his drink. "Yours? Don't be ridiculous. You gave everything up, remember? You signed it all away." I walked closer, pulled the folder from under my arm, and dropped the papers on the table between us. My hands didn't shake anymore, not everything. You took the money, the accounts, the jewels, but you never checked the title. "This house," I gestured around us, my voice sharp as a blade, "belongs to me." The smirk froze on his face. He snatched the documents and scanned them, his eyes darting across every line. His breathing grew heavier, his face turning red. "No, this can't be real. They wouldn't do this. They wouldn't give it to you." My throat tightened, but the years of pain gave my words strength. They did, because they knew who you really are. And now the truth is here, in black and white. He slammed the papers down, his fist trembling with fury. "You think you can take this from me, after everything?" I looked him straight in the eye, my voice steady as fire. "You already took everything. Now I'm only taking back what's mine." The air in the room thickened. The house that once held our laughter now felt like a battlefield. The confrontation had truly begun. His face twisted with rage, shame, and disbelief all at once. I could almost see his pride shattering, like glass right in front of me. "No, this is mine. You hear me? Mine." He slammed his fist against the table, but the force seemed to drain him instead of fuel him. His shoulders sagged, his chest heaved as though each breath was a battle. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not the kind of fear you feel toward others, but the kind that eats you from the inside. The fear of losing everything. He staggered back, gripping the wall. His lips trembled. They chose you over me." Then, before I could process it, his knees gave out. He collapsed right there on the polished wooden floor. The sound of his fall echoed through the house, followed by hurried footsteps. A couple of neighbors, drawn by the shouting, appeared at the doorway. One of them gasped and rushed in. "Oh my God, call a doctor, quick!" I stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. My brother's face was pale, his body trembling, as if the weight of his own lies had finally crushed him. A neighbor bent down, checking his pulse. "He's in shock! Someone call 911 now!" As others rushed to help, I clutched the ownership papers tightly in my hands. I thought victory would feel sweeter than this. Yes, I felt strong, powerful even. The girl who had once cried alone now stood tall, holding proof that the truth had survived. But under that strength, something else tugged at me. Grief. This wasn't just about property or money. This was my brother, the boy I once shared birthday cakes with, the boy who used to protect me at school. Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't let them fall. I just whispered to myself, almost like a secret, "You broke me once, but this time, see, it's you who can't stand." Sadness and empowerment twined together inside me, leaving me shaken but unyielding as the sirens grew closer in the distance. That night, after the ambulance pulled away and the neighbors drifted back to their own homes, the house felt impossibly still. I sat alone in the living room, Sue, rounded by the echoes of my childhood. Every corner carried a memory. My mother's laughter in the kitchen, my father's voice reading the newspaper, the sound of my brother and me chasing each other through the halls. But all of that felt distant now, like a story that belonged to someone else. I held the papers in my lap, staring at them, but my mind wasn't on ownership or legal rights anymore. It was on my parents. They had raised us with love, with lessons about kindness and respect. They always told us, family is everything. Take care of one another no matter what. And yet, here I was, sitting in the middle of the wreckage that greed had left behind. I wondered what they would think if they saw us now. My brother lying broken in a hospital bed, me sitting in the house he tried to claim as his own. Would they feel proud of me for standing up for myself, or would they just feel heartbreak that their children had turned into enemies? A tear slipped down my cheek, and this time I didn't stop it. Money was never supposed to divide us, but it did. It destroyed the bond we once had. I thought about my father's hands, strong yet gentle, and my mother's warm smile. They never cared about wealth. They cared about us being good people. But somewhere along the way, my brother lost sight of that. I pressed my palm against the old wooden table, the one my parents had bought when they first built this house. A quiet strength rose in me. Yes, the betrayal cut deep, but I also knew I had to carry forward their values, their love, their memory, because that was the real inheritance they left me. And in that moment, I began to feel the first touch of closure, The following weeks passed in a blur of hospital updates, lawyer calls, and long, quiet nights inside the house that now officially bore my name. Each creak of the floorboards reminded me of the past, yet every sunrise whispers of a future waiting to be built. I walked through the rooms slowly, touching walls, opening closets, breathing in the scent of old wood and memories. Part of me wondered if I should sell the house, let it all go, wipe the slate clean. But another part of me felt anchored here, like this was more than a building. It was my parents' legacy, my sanctuary. For the first time in years, I felt free to choose for myself. Not out of fear, not out of guilt, but out of strength. I painted one of the spare rooms a soft yellow, something bright and alive. I started leaving fresh flowers in the kitchen. I cooked simple meals just for me and ate them at the same old wooden table where my parents once sat. And slowly, piece by piece, I began to rebuild. Not just my surroundings, but myself. The nights were still heavy sometimes. Betrayal doesn't disappear overnight. But I could feel healing settling into my bones, steady and sure. I realized I no longer needed my brother's approval or his version of love. I didn't need to prove myself to anyone. This house wasn't just a reminder of what I had lost. It was a symbol of what I had survived. I may carry scars from the past, but I am no longer broken. This is my life now, my chapter to write. And with that thought, I felt the weight lift, making space for something new. Hope. If you've stayed with me this far, I want to tell you something straight from my heart. Life has a way of testing us in the most painful ways. Sometimes the people you trust the most, the ones who share your blood, your memories, your history, are the very ones who can hurt you the deepest. My brother's betrayal cut through me like nothing else ever had. And for a long time, I thought it defined me. But here's the truth I learned. Betrayal doesn't have to break you. It can shape you. Yes, I cried. Yes, I lost. Yes, I questioned myself 100 times. But in the end, standing up for myself wasn't about money or property. It was about self-respect. It was about proving to myself that I mattered, that my voice mattered. If you take anything from my story, let it be this: protect your heart, protect your worth. Even when people you love fail you, don't let their choices destroy your belief in yourself. Family isn't just about blood. Family is about love, trust, and respect. And when those things are gone, you owe it to yourself to build a life where they exist again, even if it means starting from scratch. So to whoever is listening right now, maybe you're going through something similar, maybe you're not. Remember this: you are stronger than you think. Don't let betrayal be the final chapter in your life. Let it be the beginning of your courage. Because if I could rise from the ashes of my own heartbreak, so can you. On my last night in the house, I stood by the front window, watching the quiet street outside. The same street where my brother and I once rode our bikes, where our parents waved us in for dinner, where life felt simple and whole. The ache was still there, of loss, of betrayal, of everything that could never be fixed. But over that ache, something stronger had taken root: resolve. I reached out and touched the cool glass of the window, whispering to myself, not in anger, but in certainty. What once broke me has now built me. His betrayal was my wound, but it became my strength. And with that, I turned away, flicked off the light, and walked toward the life waiting for me outside those doors. The story of inheritance and loss had ended, but the story of me, my courage, my healing, my future, was only just beginning. Thank you for walking with me through this journey. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our family of listeners. I share stories that remind us of strength, love, and the lessons life teaches the hard way. Stay with me for more powerful tales. You never know. The next story might be the one you need to hear today.